So there's been a lot of sort of tips and tricks type of content on the channel, but today I wanted to do something a little bit different and throw a bit more opinionated stuff in there. And today we're going to be going through and ranking all of the main bosses within Spider-Man 2 in a bit of a tier maker type list like we've got here. It does go without saying that we are going to be talking about a few spoilers here, so if you haven't finished the game yet, I would probably recommend clicking off the video now. On top of the main villains throughout the actual main storyline, I've thrown in two extras here, those being Wraith and Mysterio, who are both in essentially side content. They are optional bosses. And so because of that, we do have a total here of 10 different bosses. And without wasting any time, let's get stuck into ranking them. Now, how I'm going to rank them is not just based off the boss fight itself. It's also going to be, you know, the lead up to it, the, I guess, excitement of the moment. For example, some of these are really, really big twists and stuff like that. And even just taking into account the stakes of the fight and the atmosphere and all that kind of thing. So keep that in mind, and keep in mind it is obviously my opinion. I'm keen to hear your thoughts as well. So leave your own rankings down below. But with that being said, let's jump right in. Now, starting over on the left here, we do have two different Craven fights because we obviously fight him as Peter, but then we do also get to fight him and essentially beat him as Venom. So there are two different Craven ones there. Starting off with the Venom one, I'm probably going to have to put this up here pretty high. I don't think it's S tier, but this one is honestly so damn good. I think the fact that we get to fight Craven as Venom is just insane. I did think we would get to play Venom in this game, but to get to do a boss fight and essentially kill who was the main villain until that point was pretty damn awesome. I also thought the setting for this one was amazing. Fighting in Times Square and there was just fire everywhere. It was absolutely insane. So that one definitely goes up there for me. I'm not sure it will stay in that spot. It might get pushed back a little bit, but regardless, this was an awesome boss fight. Next up, we have the Craven fight as Peter. This one is probably a tier below for me. It was still very good, and I should say pretty much all of these are really good boss fights, especially when you compare them to the boss fights in the first Spider-Man game. They weren't all that good in my opinion, but pretty much all of these are actually really, really fun. What I will say about the Craven fight is that it felt maybe a little bit underwhelming considering he had been gassed up the entire game. I will also say it was very dark in that scene, so it was not probably the best setting compared to a lot of the other settings for a lot of the different boss fights in the game, but either way, it was still a really fun boss fight. And it was kind of cool that he played into the Symbiot thing where he was actually ringing the bell, and we obviously, as Peter currently having the Symbiot, would have to stop the bell from ringing because it was obviously interrupting the Symbiot due to those high frequencies. So still a very cool boss fight, but for me it probably goes down into the B tier. Now next up we have the Lizard boss fight, and this one was absolutely insane. It felt like it went forever as well. For me, I'm probably gonna have to put this in the A tier as well. It may eventually get pushed down to B, but either way it is a very, very good boss fight. Chasing him through the city and everything, it was just absolutely insane, and it just felt like this kept going forever, and then it ended in that sort of chase up the building. It was just a very, very cinematic boss fight, and the design for the Lizard in this game was absolutely insane as well. So very fun boss fight for me, and for that it goes up into the A tier, at least for now anyway. Moving on, we have the Mr. Negative fight, and this one was actually very, very fun to me. I'm not sure if it's a hot take, but I'm actually going to put this one right up here. I think this was actually one of my favorite ones in the entire game. For any of you who played God of War Ragnarok, it actually reminded me of the Heimdall fight in that game, being in a bit of an arena and just his really like aggressive and fast-paced attacks and stuff like that. This was a really fun boss fight for me, and it was probably one of the more unique ones in terms of the actual villain that you're facing as well. And it obviously had a lot of stakes there. We know his history with Miles, and we know that there was a lot of tension there, just in general a lot of emotion in that scene. So the Mr. Negative fight for me was absolutely amazing. Now next up we have Mysterio, which was obviously side content. This is when you finish all of the Mysteriums around the map. The final mission is essentially to go and face Mysterio. Now in concept, I think it was a great boss fight, but unfortunately in the execution, I felt it was a little bit too easy and like too quick in a way. So for me, it probably goes into the C tier. Not to say it was bad, but yeah, it definitely wasn't as exciting as I think it could have been. Mysterio is one of those characters who can have just the most insane boss fights because everything he's doing is an illusion. So you're not even tied to it being in New York City, for example. It can be pretty much anything and anywhere. This one was actually in a snow globe, so it was a pretty cool concept, but like I said, I just think it was a bit too quick. And so unfortunately for me, it does go down into the C tier. Now, next up we have fighting Peter Parker with the Symbiot. Obviously we were playing as Miles during this section of the game. And for me, this one was very, very good, but it probably does go below the ones I've got here. I'm thinking it will be B tier for now. I think this one was a little bit short. It should have almost been one of the main boss fights in the whole game, really, when you think about it, since it was such a crucial moment in the game. We were pretty much about to lose Peter, and then Miles pretty much saves him by beating the shit out of him. I did also think the arena that we kind of fought in was a little bit too small, and it was kind of congested by all these things like symbiote growths, for example, that were kind of getting in the way of the camera a lot of the time for me. So that brought it down just a little bit, but overall still an amazing boss fight, and the actual stakes stakes that was, you know, taking place here. It was probably the highest stakes that we had in the whole game. So regardless, it is still a very, very good boss fight. Now, next up we have the Sandman boss fight, and this one was absolutely insane, yet I'm going to have to actually put it into the C tier. Now, the reason for that is it takes place so early on in the game, and by so early on, I mean quite literally the first 10 minutes of the game. I actually went and started a new save, and I forgot how early this takes place. It is literally the first bit of gameplay that you do in the entire game is fighting Sandman. Now, the set piece itself was phenomenal. It was probably one of the coolest set pieces of any of these fights, but because it takes place so early, it is so easy and so predictable, which is no knock on the actual boss fight itself. They had to do that because it's essentially the tutorial. So it probably sounds like I'm being a bit more negative towards this one. It's not so much negative, it's just when you compare it to the rest of these fights, it was a little bit more basic, and it had to be because of when it was set. So still an insane boss fight, and probably one of the most memorable moments of the entire game for me. The way that you start out fighting Sandman is just absolutely mental, but in terms of a pure boss fight, it probably has to go a little bit lower down on the list, unfortunately. Now, next up we had the Scream boss fight, which firstly I didn't expect to see Scream in the game at all, but then the twist of it being MJ as well, this one was absolutely insane. I also thought the fact that you fight pretty much out the front of their house, and you're fighting out the front on the street, and it's all rainy and everything, that was just the perfect setting. The emotion of this fight was insane too. The fact that like MJ within Scream was very angry towards Peter, and there was just a lot of emotion between the two. It was just a very, very powerful moment in the game for me. For me, this probably goes into the S tier. It's easily one of the most memorable parts of the entire game for me, and the different move sets and stuff that Scream had were probably some of them were unique in the game as well. So very, very big one for me, and I did not really expect to see Scream at all, like I said, so I never thought I'd be putting Scream in the top tier when it comes to doing boss rankings. Now, next up we have Venom, and I think it kind of goes without saying this one is the best in the game, and so it should be. It was literally the final sort of section of the game that had been built up the whole game towards this boss fight, and my god, did it live up to those expectations. The amount of different phases that there were, the fact that we fight him as both Peter and Miles, sort of switching between the two, him then breaking out the freaking bat wings and everything, it was just insane, and it was by far the most, like, I guess the biggest set piece of the entire game, and they absolutely killed it. So for me, this by far goes, if there was another tier, I'd probably put this up in that tier, to be honest. It was absolutely insane, and I'm not gonna lie, I'm very keen to replay the game so I can simply just play this boss fight one more time. Now, lastly, we've got Wraith, who, like I said, is also in the side content. This is pretty much the ending or the second last mission of the Flame side content, and although it was still really fun, for me it probably goes down into the D tier just because compared to the rest of these, it was not quite as good. I think the setting was pretty cool. The fact you're in a bit of a like burning down building, it was definitely a very like claustrophobic feeling fight, but I think when you compare it to the rest of these boss fights, it just isn't on the same level, and that's completely fine too because of the fact it is side content. A lot of people probably have missed this and haven't even finished it, so I don't think you can kind of rate it compared to the rest of these because it is a bit unfair. These are all part of the main story. This is just additional side content, so still a really good boss fight for me, and putting in the D tier probably feels a little bit rude in a way, to be honest, but like I said, compared to the rest, it is probably not on the same level. But anyway, guys, those are my rankings. As you can see, we have Venom, we then have the Scream boss fight, Mr. Negative, then fighting Craven as Venom, the Lizard, Peter as Symbiot Spider-Man, the Craven fight as Peter, then Sandman, Mysterio, and Wraith. I'm keen to hear all your thoughts as well, so be sure to leave your own rankings down below. I'm sure we're all going to be very, very different, but regardless, I'm keen to hear your thoughts. If you are new to the channel, be sure to hit that subscribe button and turn on those notifications. We are going to be doing a setup tour showing off everything in the background here, as well as the setup that I'm actually editing the video at as soon as we hit the big 1K, so keep your eyes peeled for that. But with that being said, thank you all very much for watching. You guys have a great day, and I'll catch you all in the next one.